Hi guys, tonight we step into a winter night where the air bites your lungs the moment you breathe, and snow squeaks under your boots like dry chalk. You stand in a clearing with a log cabin ahead of you, its walls already frosting over, the sky dimming fast as a storm gathers its strength. The wind carries the smell of resin and cold iron. Your fingers ache as you lift the latch, and you realize this is not a cozy postcard version of the frontier. This is the kind of cold that tests judgment. You probably will not survive this without making the right choices, at least not comfortably. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are awake somewhere in the world right now, tell us where you are and what time it is. Now, dim the lights and let yourself step fully inside. You close the door behind you and the sound of the wind dulls. Not gone, just softened, like an animal pacing outside. The cabin is small. The logs are thick but uneven, their ends notched and stacked by hands that knew winter would come whether they were ready or not. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into your thoughts. Many frontier cabins were built quickly in late summer or early fall, sometimes in just a few days, because settlers knew the first hard freeze could arrive without warning. Speed mattered more than comfort. You can see it here in the rough corners and the floor that is more packed earth than wood. You set down what little you carry, and your breath clouds the dim interior. There is a hearth at one end, blackened from past fires. The cabin smells of smoke, damp wood, and something faintly animal. It is not unpleasant, just honest. Outside, the storm begins to speak more clearly. Wind slides along the walls, finding every weakness. Snow taps the roof in irregular rhythms. You listen, because listening is part of survival. In the quiet moments between gusts, the silence feels heavy, as if the night itself is leaning in. You move closer to the hearth, touching the stones. They are cold now, but you imagine the fire that will soon live here, deciding whether this night becomes merely uncomfortable or truly dangerous. Historians still argue whether early pioneers prioritized sleeping warmth over daytime efficiency when planning their cabins, or whether both were simply compromises forced by limited time and tools. Standing here, it feels less like a debate and more like a series of small, urgent decisions. As you look around, you notice the chinking between the logs. It is a patchwork of clay, straw, and bits of whatever could be found nearby. In some places, the filler has cracked and fallen away. Cold air slips through in thin fingers. There is a quirky detail that does not always make it into textbooks. Some settlers mixed animal hair or even ash into their chinking to improve insulation, believing it made the walls tougher against wind and pests. Whether it truly worked is still discussed, but tonight you are grateful for every handful that stayed in place. You test a rough sleeping platform along one wall. It creaks under your weight, built from split logs laid side by side. There is no mattress, only the promise of blankets and hides you have yet to arrange. The floor beneath your boots is hard, frozen earth. You can feel the cold rising already, seeping upward like water through stone. This is the moment when the modern part of your brain protests. Surely people did not sleep like this night after night. And yet, they did, because the alternative was worse. The storm strengthens. Wind presses against the cabin and then pulls away, again and again, as if testing resolve. You think of the people who once stood exactly where you stand, listening to the same sounds, making the same calculations. How much wood to burn now versus later? How close to the fire to sleep without risking sparks? Whether to eat a little more before bed or save food for morning? These thoughts are not dramatic, they are practical, almost quiet. Survival often is. You light a small oil lamp, its flame trembling. Shadows stretch and shrink along the walls, turning knots in the logs into watching eyes. Darkness here is thick, not like the polite darkness after switching off a bedside lamp. When the light goes out later, the night will feel complete. That knowledge settles into you, oddly calming and unsettling at the same time. Your body begins to register fatigue, not the gentle tiredness of a long day, but a heavier pull that comes from cold and concentration. Sleep tonight will not be a simple surrender. It will be negotiated. You will lie down listening to the cabin breathe and move, trusting that these stacked logs and packed earth are enough to keep the worst of the storm outside. For now, you take one last look around, memorizing the space, the hearth, the platform, the walls that stand between you and the wind. Outside, snow continues to fall, And winter makes it clear that this is only the beginning. You draw a slow breath, steady yourself, and prepare for the night ahead. You step back outside briefly, because before you can sleep, this place has to exist in a more complete way. The cabin is not finished just because it stands. In winter, a shelter is only as good as its weakest joint. The wind greets you immediately, sharper now, carrying fine snow that finds your eyes and lashes. You turn your back to it and run your glove along the outer wall, feeling the rounded surfaces of the logs, still rough with axe marks. Each log tells a story of speed and necessity. Pioneers often raised these walls using freshly cut timber, sometimes still green, because waiting for wood to season properly could mean missing the narrow window before winter storms arrived. That choice mattered later, as green logs shrank and twisted in the cold, opening gaps that no one had planned for. You remember how these walls went up, one log at a time, lifted with brute force and simple leverage. No cranes, no power tools, just muscle, rope, and patience. The corners are notched so the logs lock together, a technique borrowed and adapted from Northern European traditions. It is a mainstream historical fact that many early American settlers brought log construction methods from Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, where cold winters had already taught hard lessons. Standing here now, you can feel that inherited knowledge in the way the walls resist the wind. You press your shoulder against the cabin, testing it. There is a faint give, not weakness exactly, but flexibility. That is intentional. A rigid structure cracks, a log cabin can move slightly and survive. Historians still argue whether this flexibility was fully understood by early builders or simply discovered through trial and error. Either way, tonight you are grateful the walls can bend without breaking. Snow gathers at your boots as you walk the perimeter. The roof looms above, steeply pitched. This too is no accident. A steep roof sheds snow more easily, reducing the crushing weight that could collapse a cabin overnight. Some pioneers learned this lesson the hard way, after flatter roofs failed during heavy storms. There is a strange comfort in knowing that each angle and overlap here exists, because someone, somewhere, once froze, panicked, or lost a home to winter. You spot a section of chinking that has fallen away near the base of the wall. Cold air pours through the gap like water through a crack in ice. You kneel and pack it tighter with clay, your fingers stiffening almost immediately. It is messy work. Clay under the nails, straw sticking to damp gloves. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some frontier regions, settlers added dried moss to chinking, not just for insulation but because they believed it discouraged insects. Whether that belief was true is debated, but moss did help trap air, and trapped air is warmth. As you work, the wind howls louder, and the cabin responds with low groans, wood rubbing against wood. These sounds might frighten someone unused to them. You feel a flicker of unease, but also recognition. A living structure makes noise. Silence would be worse. Silence might mean something has already failed. You stand and stamp your feet, trying to keep blood moving. The storm is fully committed now. Snow drives sideways, erasing your tracks almost as soon as you make them. You imagine what this land looked like before the cabin stood here. Just open ground and trees, no promise of safety at all. Building these walls was an act of optimism bordering on stubbornness. It said, "I plan to be here tomorrow." Inside again, you close the door and slide the wooden bar into place. The difference is immediate. Still cold, yes, but manageable. The walls do their job by slowing the world outside. You lean against them and feel the faint vibration of the wind passing over the roof. It is like standing inside a drum. You take a moment to look at the logs from the inside now. The inner surfaces are flatter, hewn with care where hands would brush against them daily. There are tool marks everywhere, each one a frozen gesture from the past. These marks are not decorative. They are evidence of labor done quickly, sometimes under pressure. Sleep tonight depends on them. You move to the hearth and begin arranging kindling. As you do, your eyes return to the walls again and again. Will they hold the heat? Will the fire draw air properly? Will smoke find its way out instead of pooling where you breathe? These are not abstract worries. Poorly built cabins could fill with smoke so thick it made sleep impossible, forcing people to choose between coughing all night or letting the fire die. Historians still debate how often pioneers rebuilt or significantly modified their cabins after the first winter. Some argue that many structures were temporary, improved only if the family survived the season. Others believe more planning went into these homes than we give credit for. Looking around, you sense both truths living side by side. The cabin is rough, but it is not careless. You set a few heavier logs near the hearth, ready for later. The smell of fresh-cut wood mixes with the older scent of smoke. It is grounding. The cabin feels smaller now, but also more intimate. Every inch matters. There is no wasted space. Even the air feels rationed. You sit on the sleeping platform again, testing it more deliberately this time. The wall behind it is thick, the logs overlapping like stacked arms. This is not the warmest spot, but it is safer from sparks than sleeping closer to the fire. Many pioneers arranged their sleeping places with fire safety in mind, knowing that a single ember could end everything in minutes. It is strange how fear of fire and fear of cold coexist here, pulling you in opposite directions. Outside, a branch snaps under the weight of snow. The sound carries through the storm, sharp and final. You pause, listening. The cabin answers with a soft creak, as if acknowledging the noise. You find yourself trusting it a little more now. Not because it is perfect, but because it responds. You rub your hands together and prepare to light the fire. The walls are ready as they can be. The storm is here, the shelter stands, and the long night stretches ahead. You breathe slowly, letting the rhythm of the wind become background instead of threat. Sleep will come later. First, there is warmth to earn. You kneel near the wall again, this time inside the cabin, and the cold announces itself in a quieter way. It slips along the floor, curls around your ankles, and rises slowly, patiently, as if it has all night to reach you. The fire is not lit yet, and every crack in the wall feels suddenly personal. You press your palm against a seam between two logs and feel the faint movement of air. Not a blast, just a steady whisper, enough to steal warmth while you sleep. You gather what you can find. A bucket of clay that has stiffened in the cold, dry grass saved from autumn, scraps of fabric worn thin long before tonight. You push these materials into the gaps, using a stick when your fingers protest too much. This work is tedious and uncomfortable, but it matters. People living on the frontier learned quickly that sealing a cabin was not a one-time task. It was something you returned to again and again, especially after storms, as wood shifted and settled. Old settlement records suggest that families often spent part of each winter day repairing, chinking, treating it like maintenance rather than construction. Cabins breathed. Logs expanded when damp, shrank when frozen, and the spaces between them changed constantly. What kept you warm last week might fail tonight. You notice this now, as bits of dried clay crumble away under pressure, no longer bonded to the wood. There is a faint smell to the clay as you work, earthy, mineral, mixed with straw. It reminds you that much of pioneer life relied on immediate surroundings. If the soil here was poor, your walls suffered. If the grass was brittle, your insulation failed sooner. Survival depended not only on effort, but on geography. One lesser-known detail emerges in letters written by settlers in colder regions. Some mention stuffing old clothing into wall gaps during extreme cold snaps, sacrificing garments to save body heat at night. It was not ideal, and it left them short on clothing later, but it brought warmth when it mattered most. You understand the logic immediately. Cloth traps air. Air slows cold. Comfort becomes a secondary concern. As you work along the wall, the sounds outside deepen. Wind presses, releases, then returns stronger, searching. Snow hisses as it slides down the logs. Occasionally, a sharp gust forces cold air through a newly sealed crack, testing your efforts. You pause, listening, adjusting. The cabin feels like a fragile truce between you and the storm. There is disagreement among modern researchers about how effective chinking truly was during severe winter storms. Some argue that even well-sealed cabins lost heat rapidly, making fires the primary defense. Others believe that careful sealing dramatically reduced heat loss and made nights survivable with less fuel. Sitting here, pushing clay into gaps with numb hands, the debate feels less abstract. Even a small reduction in draft changes how the cold feels against your skin. You finish one wall and move to the next. The process becomes almost meditative. Press, smooth, pack, move on. Your breathing slows. The cabin grows quieter as fewer drafts make it inside. It is still cold, but it is a contained cold now, something you can manage rather than fight constantly. You notice how uneven the logs are. Some bow inward, others outward, creating pockets where air loves to hide. This irregularity comes from hand cutting and limited tools. Precision was rare. Speed was valued. Cabins went up fast, often with neighbors helping, because winter did not wait for perfection. That haste shows itself now, months later, in every awkward gap you fill. Your knees ache from kneeling on the frozen floor. You shift your weight and feel the chill bite deeper. Pioneers often layered evergreen branches or animal skins on the floor near sleeping areas, not for comfort, but to reduce heat loss to the ground. Dirt floors pulled warmth from bodies relentlessly. You make a mental note to arrange your bedding carefully later. The door is another problem. Wooden planks fitted together with gaps that widen in cold weather. You wedge a rolled piece of fabric along the bottom edge, blocking the worst of the incoming air. It looks crude, but it works. Many cabins relied on such improvised solutions. There were no perfect doors here, only less terrible ones. You stand and stretch slowly, feeling blood return to your legs. The cabin smells different now, less sharp, more contained. Outside, the storm continues its work, but inside, the space feels slightly more stable. You have not conquered the cold, but you have negotiated with it. There is a quiet moment where you simply stand and listen. The wind is still loud, but its voice is muffled. The walls hold, the clay holds. For now, this is often how winter nights were won, not through dramatic acts, but through small, repetitive tasks, done carefully and without complaint. You brush dirt from your hands and move toward the hearth. The fire will come soon, but it will only help if the warmth stays inside. You glance back at the walls one more time, mentally tracing the seams you sealed. You know they will need attention again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in a week. Winter is persistent. As you prepare the kindling, you feel a subtle shift in your own body, less tension in your shoulders, a faint sense of readiness. The cabin is still rough, the night will still be long, but the worst drafts are slowed, and that makes sleep possible. Outside, the storm roars on, unaware of your small victories. Inside, you take a steady breath and accept that this is enough for now. You have done what you can with what you have. The rest of the night will depend on fire, patience, and listening carefully when the walls begin to speak again. You tilt your head back and look up, letting your eyes follow the dark line where wall becomes roof. The fire still waits unlit, and without its glow, the ceiling feels closer, heavier. Snow has begun to pile up there, layer by layer, silent but insistent. You imagine the weight pressing down, not all at once, but gradually, as if testing how much the cabin can bear, before asking for more. The roof is built steep, the angle sharp enough that snow should slide off once it grows heavy. That was the intention, at least. Frontier builders learned quickly that a shallow roof invited disaster. Accounts from early settlements describe cabins crushed overnight, their occupants lucky if they escaped before dawn. This is why the rafters above you are thick, cut from young trees and set close together. They creak softly now, adjusting to the cold. You step outside again, pulling your coat tighter, just long enough to inspect the roofline. Snow skitters down in small avalanches as the wind shakes the structure. It reassures you. Movement means the weight is shifting instead of settling. Some pioneers knocked snow from their roofs during storms using long poles, especially when wet snow threatened to cling. Others trusted the pitch and hoped for the best. There was rarely a single correct answer, only choices shaped by exhaustion and weather. Back inside, you run your fingers along one of the support beams. It is solid, rough beneath your skin. You think about how these beams were chosen. Builders favored straight trunks with minimal knots, knowing weak points could snap under load. Yet perfection was rare. Sometimes the best available tree had flaws that everyone noticed and quietly worried about. Sleep beneath such a beam would never be deep. There is a long-standing disagreement among historians about how often roof collapses actually occurred compared to how often they appear in dramatic retellings. Some suggest the danger has been exaggerated by later storytelling. Others point to diaries and settlement reports that mention frequent repairs and near misses. Standing here now, listening to the wind drive snow against the shingles, you understand why the fear lingered, whether or not collapse was common. The roof covering itself varies by region. Here, wooden shingles overlap like scales, each one split by hand. In other places, settlers used sod or bark, trading durability for insulation. Sod roofs trapped heat well but added tremendous weight when soaked and frozen. Shingle roofs shed snow better but leaked more air. Neither option offered complete peace of mind. Winter always found a way in. You move your sleeping platform slightly, positioning it away from the center of the room. Many pioneers avoided sleeping directly under the heaviest part of the roof if they could help it. choosing spots near walls where beams transferred weight more efficiently. It is a small adjustment, but it calms you. Control, even limited control, matters on nights like this. The storm grows louder. Wind rushes over the roof, then pauses, then returns in waves. Each gust presses the structure downward just enough for you to feel it through your feet. The cabin answers with soft pops and groans as wood fibers contract in the cold. These sounds are unsettling at first, but they also become familiar. You learn to tell the difference between normal movement and something more serious. Tonight, everything sounds strained but intact. You imagine lying down later, eyes closed, counting the seconds between creaks, deciding whether a particular sound is worth sitting up for. Many settlers slept lightly during storms, waking often to check fires, listen for changes, or brush accumulating snow from inside corners where it crept through gaps. Sleep was broken, fragmented, but still necessary. There is an odd intimacy to the relationship between sleeper and shelter here. The cabin is not a passive object. It communicates, it complains, it adjusts. You respond by listening. This awareness sharpens your senses. You notice how the wind shifts direction, how the snow changes from a hiss to a dull thud when flakes grow heavier. These details would shape your rest. You recall a lesser-known note from a homesteader's journal describing how they slept with a hand axe nearby during severe storms, not for defense against animals, but to cut their way out if the roof collapsed. Whether this was common practice is unclear, but the fact that someone thought it necessary tells you everything about the underlying fear. You glance at your own tools and consider where you place them. The idea of the roof failing is not constant terror, more like a low hum of concern. It lives alongside hunger, cold, and fatigue. You learn to carry it without letting it overwhelm you. That balance is part of survival. Panic wastes energy. Ignoring danger invites it closer. You sit down on the platform again, testing the overhead space. The ceiling feels low enough to trap warmth once the fire burns, but not so low that sparks will easily reach it. Many cabins bore scorch marks where embers leapt higher than expected. Fires kept people alive, but they also destroyed homes. The roof above you shows darkened patches, evidence of past close calls. Snow thumps against the shingles again, heavier now. You hold your breath for a moment, listening. Nothing gives. The sound fades. Relief washes through you slowly, like warmth returning to fingers after numbness. You exhale and let your shoulders drop. The roof holds, at least for now. Winter nights are long, and storms rarely keep a steady pace. They surge, retreat, then return stronger. You accept that you will remain alert even as you try to sleep. Rest here is not unconsciousness. It is a lighter state, one ear always tuned to the language of wood and wind. You move back toward the hearth, ready to light the fire at last. The roof has made its case. It will stand if you respect its limits. You will not overload the loft with supplies. You will keep the fire modest. You will listen. As the match flares to life in your hand, you glance upward one more time. Snow continues to gather and slide away. The cabin breathes. You are still inside it. That is enough to let the night continue. You crouch in front of the hearth, the stone cold enough to sting your knees through your clothes. The firewood is stacked neatly beside you, each log chosen earlier with care. Dry pieces first, then thicker ones to hold the heat. Your hands move slowly, deliberately. Fire here is not background comfort. It is the difference between waking and not waking. You strike the match, and for a moment nothing happens. Then a thin flame appears, fragile but determined. It catches the shavings, then the twigs, and finally begins to lick at the larger pieces. The smell changes instantly. Sharp sulfur fades into the familiar scent of burning wood. Warmth does not arrive all at once. It creeps outward in uneven waves, touching your face first, then your hands. Settlers depended on open hearth fires for both cooking and heating well into the 19th century, even as enclosed stoves became available elsewhere. In remote frontier areas, hauling heavy cast-iron stoves over rough terrain was often impossible. A simple hearth built from stone and clay was more practical, even if it was less efficient. Tonight, you feel that trade-off. Heat escapes up the chimney as fast as it forms, but enough stays behind to matter. You feed the fire carefully. Too much wood and it will roar, burning fuel you may need later. Too little and it will fade before dawn. This balance was learned through experience, not instruction. People paid attention to the color of flames, the sound of burning logs, the way embers settled. Fire spoke its own language, and those who listened slept warmer. Smoke curls upward, then hesitates, drifting back toward you before finding its way out. You cough softly and adjust a log. Ventilation is always a gamble. Chimneys in early cabins were often poorly sealed, built from sticks and clay that cracked over time. Smoke sometimes filled sleeping spaces so badly that people had to open doors even in deep winter, sacrificing warmth to breathe. Personal journals describe nights spent half awake, shifting logs and adjusting airflow to keep smoke at tolerable levels. It was exhausting. There is lingering disagreement about how dangerous indoor smoke exposure was for pioneers, but there is no question it shaped daily life. Chronic coughing and irritated eyes were common complaints, accepted as part of the cost of warmth. The fire settles into a steady burn. The stones around the hearth begin to absorb heat, slowly turning from icy to merely cool. You press your hands closer, careful not to scorch your skin. Firelight dances across the walls, filling the cabin with movement. Shadows sway and stretch, turning the space into something almost alive. You drag a log closer to the sleeping platform, positioning it to act as a barrier between you and the cold wall. Many pioneers used furniture, chests, or stacked firewood this way, creating pockets of warmth where bodies would rest. Heat was uneven. You learn to chase it, rearranging your space as needed. A small pop from the fire makes you jump, then smile at yourself. Tension drains slowly as warmth spreads. Your toes begin to thaw, sending pins and needles up your feet. It hurts, but it is a welcome pain. You stamp lightly, encouraging circulation, then settle again. There is a lesser-known practice mentioned in winter letters from frontier families. Some kept a large stone or brick in the fire before bed, then wrapped it in cloth and placed it near their feet while sleeping. It acted as a crude heat reservoir, radiating warmth for hours. You consider trying it. Resources are limited, but the idea is tempting. You glance at the fuel pile. It looks smaller now that the fire is alive. Wood disappears quickly in cold weather. Trees that seemed abundant in summer suddenly feel precious. Settlers often rationed fuel carefully, choosing cooler nights over empty woodpiles later in winter. It was a constant calculation, weighing immediate comfort against future survival. The fire changes the sound of the cabin. Wood crackles softly. Stones tick as they expand. The wind outside is still loud, but it no longer dominates. Inside, there is a counterpoint, a human-made rhythm pushing back against the storm. You sit and listen, letting the two sounds coexist. You adjust the hearth opening slightly, using a flat stone to limit airflow. The flames lower, steadier now. This is how you want them for the night. Not dramatic, reliable. Many pioneers banked their fires before sleep, piling ash over embers to slow combustion. The fire would smolder through the night, easier to revive at dawn. Done poorly, it could die or flare dangerously. Done well, it was a small miracle. Your face grows warm enough that you loosen your collar. The contrast between front and back of your body is striking. One side flushed, the other still chilled. You rotate slowly, sharing heat across your skin. Sleep will not come easily like this, but it will come. You notice soot marks above the hearth, layered from years of fires. Each layer represents a winter endured. These marks are not cleaned away, they are accepted, even valued. A clean hearth might mean it had not been used enough. As you prepare to settle down, you think about how fire shaped sleep patterns. People slept in shorter stretches, waking to tend flames or add fuel. Long, uninterrupted sleep was rare in winter cabins. Instead, rest came in waves, stitched together by firelight and routine. Modern sleep science would have plenty to say about that, but here, theory matters less than warmth. The fire holds steady as you arrange your bedding nearby. You test the air one last time, breathing deeply. Smoke stays low, heat stays close. Outside, the storm howls, but inside, something like comfort takes shape. You sit back, watching embers glow. This fire is now your companion for the night. It demands attention, but it gives life in return. You lean closer, eyes heavy, letting the flicker slow your thoughts. When you finally lie down, the fire is the last thing you see. Its light pulses gently, painting the ceiling in amber. You listen to it breathe alongside the cabin. For now, it is enough. The night stretches on, but you are warmer than you were, and that makes all the difference. You lie back on the sleeping platform, eyes half closed, and immediately notice how the air feels different now that the fire has settled into its rhythm. It is warmer, yes, but also heavier. Each breath carries the faint taste of smoke, Not enough to choke you, but enough to remind you that warmth always comes with a price. Your chest rises and falls slowly as you test the air, gauging whether it is safe enough to let sleep take you. Smoke curls lazily near the ceiling, collecting in darker bands where heat stalls. The chimney draws, but imperfectly. That was common in early cabins, where chimneys were often built from wood lined with clay rather than stone. Over time, cracks formed, airflow changed, and smoke behaved unpredictably. People learned to read these signs the way sailors read the sea. A slight sting in the eyes, a persistent cough. These were warnings, not inconveniences. You shift your position, angling your head so cleaner air reaches your lungs. Many pioneers slept closer to the floor for this reason, where smoke was thinner, even though the cold was worse there. It was a trade few enjoyed making, but one they understood instinctively. Breathing came first. Comfort followed if it could. Letters from frontier settlements mention nights when smoke grew so thick that families sat awake until dawn, unwilling to risk unconsciousness. Other accounts describe people opening doors briefly in the dead of winter to clear the air, then sealing themselves back inside before the cold could fully reclaim the room. These were not rare emergencies, but recurring challenges woven into daily life. You notice how soot coats the stones and nearby logs, dulling their color. It flakes away when touched, leaving black streaks on your fingers. Over years, this buildup reduced the efficiency of fires and increased smoke, yet cleaning chimneys in winter was dangerous and unpleasant. Many waited until spring, accepting the smoky nights as temporary burdens. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about how indoor air quality affected long-term health on the frontier. Some suggest respiratory illnesses were worsened by constant smoke exposure. Others argue that cold and malnutrition played larger roles. As you breathe carefully now, counting slow inhales, the question feels immediate rather than academic. You reach for the oil lamp and lower its wick slightly, reducing both light and fumes. Light is comforting, but it also competes with the fire for oxygen. This is another quiet calculation pioneers made without naming it. Every flame changed the air. Every adjustment mattered. The sounds of the cabin shift again. The fire crackles softly. The chimney exhales in uneven pulses. Outside, the storm presses on, but inside, the smoke gives the space a hazy intimacy. Shadows blur. Edges soften. Your thoughts slow with them. A lesser-known detail appears in some regional practices. In certain areas, settlers burned specific types of wood at night, believing some produced less smoke or cleaner heat. Whether this was truly effective or simply tradition is unclear, but choices like these shaped nightly routines. You glance at the logs burning now, wondering how different woods might change the air you breathe. You cough once, quietly, then sip from a small container of water you keep nearby. Dry air and smoke parch your throat quickly. Hydration mattered more than people sometimes realized, especially during long winter nights when fires burned steadily. Even then, water was rationed carefully, often melted from snow and warmed near the hearth. Your body begins to relax despite the discomfort. Muscles loosen. Breathing finds a slower pace. Sleep approaches, not as a sudden drop, but as a gradual dimming. You remain aware of the air, ready to wake if smoke thickens. This light vigilance becomes second nature. You think about how modern homes hide these concerns. Vents, filters, sensors. Here, you are the sensor. Your lungs tell you when something is wrong. Your eyes confirm it. This awareness keeps you tethered to the space even as your mind drifts. The fire shifts, a log settling inward. Smoke briefly thickens, then thins again as the chimney catches. You open your eyes, check the room, then close them once more. It is a small interruption, but it reminds you that sleep here is negotiated in pieces. You roll onto your side, tucking your hands near your chest to keep them warm. The platform creaks softly. Somewhere above, the roof answers with a faint sound of its own. The cabin continues its conversation with the storm, and you are part of that exchange now. As minutes stretch, your breathing deepens. The smoke fades into the background of sensation, present but manageable. You trust your instincts to wake you if it grows dangerous. Many pioneers did the same, developing a light sleep that balanced rest with readiness. You drift in and out, thoughts loosening their grip. The firelight pulses through your eyelids, turning darkness amber and red. Outside, the wind does not stop, but it feels farther away now, as if the cabin has claimed a small pocket of calm within the chaos. Eventually, sleep settles more firmly. Not deep, not careless, but enough. enough to let your body recover, enough to face whatever the night brings next. The air remains smoky but breathable. The fire remains alive but controlled. For now, the balance holds. You wake slightly as your body shifts, not fully conscious, just aware enough to feel the hard truth beneath you. The sleeping platform does not forgive pressure points. Split logs press through thin padding, reminding you that rest here is something you arrange carefully, not something you assume. Beneath the platform, the ground holds its cold stubbornly, drawing heat downward no matter how close the fire burns. You adjust your position, sliding a folded hide under your hip, then another beneath your shoulder. Small changes matter. People on the frontier learned to listen to their bodies at night, responding to numbness before it turned painful. Sleep was an active process, involving constant micro-decisions. Ignore discomfort too long and it woke you anyway. Most early cabins had dirt floors for years before wooden planks were added, if they were added at all. Lumber took time and tools. Earth was immediate, packed hard, sometimes mixed with ash or lime to reduce dampness. These floors stayed cold even near the hearth. Moisture rose invisibly from them, chilling feet and bedding alike. Settlers often laid branches, straw, or bark beneath sleeping areas to slow this effect, though nothing stopped it entirely. You feel the chill most clearly along your spine. The wall behind the platform radiates cold despite your earlier work sealing gaps. Logs hold warmth slowly and release cold efficiently. You shift again, turning so your back faces the fire instead. Heat licks through layers of cloth, uneven but welcome. There is a recurring discussion among historians about whether raised sleeping platforms significantly improved warmth compared to sleeping directly on the floor. Some argue elevation reduced contact with cold ground and dampness. Others note that higher positions exposed sleepers to colder air and smoke. Your body offers its own answer. Raised feels better tonight, even if it brings new discomforts. The platform creaks softly with each movement, a sound that blends into the rhythm of the cabin. Wood expands and contracts around you. Nails, if there are any, groan faintly. You grow familiar with these noises quickly. They stop startling you and begin to signal reassurance. Movement means structure. Silence would feel wrong. You pull a blanket closer around your legs. It smells faintly of animal and smoke, comforting in a practical way. Many settlers slept fully clothed during winter, adding layers rather than removing them. Undressing meant losing precious warmth. Buttons and seams pressed into skin all night, leaving marks by morning, but no one complained. Comfort was secondary to waking up. Some accounts mention families rearranging sleeping spots during the coldest weeks, rotating positions so no one endured the worst drafts night after night. Children often slept closest to the fire, elders nearer walls where temperatures were more stable. These choices were rarely sentimental. They were strategic. You press your palm against the platform beneath you. The wood is no longer icy, but it is far from warm. Heat from the fire rises and escapes faster than it settles here. This is why pioneers layered relentlessly. One blanket was never enough. 2 helped. 3 felt indulgent if they were available. A lesser-known habit appears in a few winter diaries. Some people slept with their feet wrapped in spare clothing stuffed into sacks, creating makeshift insulation that stayed in place even when they turned. It was not elegant, but it worked. You tuck fabric tighter around your ankles, mimicking the instinct. Your breath forms a faint cloud as you exhale, even with the fire burning. It drifts upward and disappears into shadow. You find this oddly calming. It reminds you that you are still warm enough to breathe steadily. Too cold, and breath becomes sharp and shallow. You are not there yet. The fire shifts again, sending a brief pulse of heat across your back. You sigh without meaning to. Muscles relax further. The platform still presses in places, but fatigue dulls the edges of discomfort. Sleep deepens in stages, like stepping down into darker water. You think briefly about modern beds, about softness engineered for ease. Then the thought drifts away. Comparison does not help here. What matters is alignment, warmth, and vigilance. You find a position where your weight spreads evenly enough, where no single point screams for attention. Above you, the roof murmurs softly as snow continues to slide and settle. Beneath you, the earth remains patient and cold. You are suspended between them, held by rough carpentry and habit. This is how many winter nights passed, balanced on simple structures that asked much of the people using them. You draw the blanket up near your chin, careful not to block your breath. Your hands tucked beneath it, fingers curled inward for warmth. The platform no longer creaks as much. Your movements slow. The cabin feels smaller now, closer, as if leaning in. Sleep does not arrive as a single moment. It thickens gradually. Thoughts stretch and blur. Sensations soften. The hard edges of wood and cold fade into background awareness. You remain ready to wake, but you rest anyway, trusting the fire and the walls to hold. Outside, the storm continues its long work. Inside, you settle into a fragile, workable comfort. The platform holds. The blankets stay in place. Your body finds a rhythm that might last an hour, maybe two, before the next adjustment is needed. For now, that is enough. You stir again, not because of noise this time, but because the cold has found a new path. It slips around your knees, settles behind your shoulders, and reminds you that stillness invites chill. You reach for another layer without fully opening your eyes. Blankets, hides, whatever you have, they all come into play now. Winter sleep is a slow stacking of defenses. You pull a heavy hide over your torso. It smells faintly of smoke and animal fat, a scent that clings no matter how many seasons pass. These coverings were not chosen for softness. They were chosen for density. Thick hides trapped heat better than woven cloth, though they were stiff and awkward. Turning beneath them required effort, and that effort often woke you fully before you settled again. Most frontier households owned far fewer blankets than people imagine. Textile production was slow, and store-bought cloth was expensive and difficult to transport. Families layered what they had: quilts, patched again and again, woolen coverings that scratched but warmed, animal skins that shed bits of hair onto everything. You accept the texture against your skin, focusing on the warmth it brings rather than the discomfort. There is an old assumption that pioneers slept buried beneath mountains of bedding. In reality, many accounts describe scarcity. Coverings were shared. Children slept under the same blankets as parents. Extra layers were added only when someone became dangerously cold. You feel this economy of warmth now as you adjust, careful not to waste what little insulation you have. You notice how the weight of the layers changes your breathing. Heavy coverings press gently against your chest, slowing your breaths, whether you intend it or not. It is oddly calming, like the steady pressure encourages rest. Some settlers commented on this sensation, describing how heavy quilts made sleep feel deeper, even when cold lingered at the edges. A small detail surfaces in winter letters from rural settlements. Some families tucked heated stones or bricks between layers of blankets, not directly against skin but wrapped carefully to avoid burns. The warmth lasted longer when trapped this way, radiating slowly through the night. You shift your feet slightly, imagining that steady heat near your toes, and wish you had prepared one earlier. Your hands seek warmth instinctively. You tuck them beneath your arms, or press them between your thighs. Fingers lose heat quickly, and numbness arrives before pain. People learn to protect extremities first, knowing frostbite did not announce itself loudly. It crept in quietly, stealing sensation before anyone noticed. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about how effective layered bedding truly was compared to maintaining a hotter fire. Some argue that insulation around the body mattered more than ambient warmth. Others suggest fires were the primary defense, with blankets offering only marginal help. Lying here now, you feel both truths. The fire warms the room. The layers warm you. One without the other would not be enough. You roll slightly, redistributing the hides. The platform creaks once, then settles. The sound blends into the night. Outside, the storm remains relentless, but its voice is muted now, filtered through wood, clay, and cloth. Inside your cocoon of layers, the world feels smaller. Your face is the only part left exposed. Cold brushes your cheeks and nose lightly. You pull the edge of a blanket higher, stopping just short of your mouth. Breathing into fabric risks dampness, and dampness turns cold fast. This balance between coverage and airflow is learned through experience, not instruction. You remember a practical trick mentioned in an old homestead journal. Some people slept with scarves or spare cloth loosely draped over their faces, allowing breath to escape while reducing heat loss. It was not perfect, but it helped on the coldest nights. You experiment briefly, then discard the idea when the fabric feels too close. The layers grow heavier as fatigue deepens. Movement becomes slower, more deliberate. You feel anchored now, pressed gently into the platform by the weight above you. Muscles relax further. The cold does not vanish, but it becomes distant, a dull presence rather than an urgent threat. You listen to your own breathing, steady and slow, Each inhale draws in air warmed slightly by the fire. Each exhale releases heat into the small space beneath the blankets, warming it just enough to matter. This microclimate is fragile. One careless movement can collapse it, forcing you to start over. You lie still, respecting the balance you have created. Some nights, settlers described waking to find frost forming on the outer layers of their bedding, moisture from breath freezing where it met colder air. You reach out briefly and touch the edge of a hide. It feels cool but not frozen. Relief settles in. Tonight, at least for now, the layers are doing their job. Your thoughts drift as sleep deepens. The fire crackles softly, a background murmur rather than a call for attention. The roof continues its quiet conversation with the snow. The walls hold firm, wrapped in layers that smell of work and survival. You feel oddly secure. There is comfort in routine, even harsh routine. You know that if the cold worsens, you will add another layer. If the fire dims, you will wake and tend it. Nothing here is automatic, but nothing is unfamiliar either. This knowledge allows your mind to loosen its grip. You shift once more, settling into a position that feels sustainable. Knees slightly bent, back supported by uneven wood, blankets tucked tight. The weight presses down evenly now. No sharp edges demand attention. The cold hums quietly at the margins, kept at bay by effort and habit. Sleep thickens around you. Sounds blur. Sensations soften. You are still aware of your body, of the layers and the fire and the storm, but they fade into a single, manageable presence. This is not the deep sleep of modern nights. It is lighter, threaded with awareness, but it is rest. As you drift, the layers remain in place, doing what they have done for countless winter nights before, holding warmth, holding breath, holding life through the long hours until morning light finds the cabin again. You wake again, this time to a sound that does not belong entirely to the storm. It is softer, closer, a shifting weight, a low, warm breath. For a moment, confusion drifts through you, then memory settles in. You are not alone in this space. Nearby, livestock stir, sharing the cabin not out of affection, but necessity. In many frontier cabins, animals were brought indoors during the coldest nights, not always into the main living space, but often close enough to matter. A low partition, a corner stall, sometimes nothing more than a rope barrier separated human from animal. The warmth they produced was valuable, steady, and alive. You feel it now, a faint pocket of heat moving slowly through the room. A cow shifts her weight, hooves scraping softly against packed earth. The sound is oddly reassuring. Large animals generate significant body heat, and in small enclosed spaces, that heat could raise the temperature noticeably. Some settlers credited livestock with making the difference between a tolerable night and a dangerous one. Others found the practice unbearable, citing noise, smell, and risk. The smell reaches you now, earthy, sharp, unmistakably animal. It mixes with smoke and damp wood, creating an atmosphere that is far from pleasant, but deeply familiar to those who lived this way. Winter forced compromises. Cleanliness gave way to warmth, comfort bowed to survival. There is disagreement among historians about how widespread this practice truly was. Some argue that sharing indoor space with animals was common only in the most extreme conditions or poorest households. Others point to architectural evidence showing stalls built directly into cabin designs, suggesting it was planned rather than improvised. Listening to the steady breathing nearby, you suspect the truth varied by region and necessity. You shift slightly, adjusting your blankets as a draft carries warm air toward you. It is subtle, but you feel it. Heat from bodies is different from heat from fire. It moves slowly, unevenly, but it lasts. Fires demand fuel. Animals produce warmth simply by existing. That reliability mattered during long storms, when wood supplies ran low. A chicken rustles somewhere, feathers brushing against wood. Chickens were sometimes kept inside during severe weather to prevent freezing and predation. Their presence added little heat, but they represented food security. Eggs when winter allowed, meat if hunger pressed too hard. Even their quiet movements reminded settlers what was at stake. You consider the risks. Animals brought moisture, parasites, and the possibility of injury. A startled cow could knock over furniture. A kick could break bones. Disease spread more easily in enclosed spaces. These dangers were known. They were weighed against the cold and often found acceptable. Personal accounts mention children sleeping closer to animals during winter nights, drawn by warmth and comfort. Parents watched carefully, balancing safety against benefit. You imagine the quiet trust required to let a child rest beside a living furnace that could also be unpredictable. The animal shifts again, settling more deeply. The sound is heavy, but calm. You mirror it unconsciously, relaxing further into your bedding. The shared warmth seeps into your layers, softening the edge of the cold. It is not dramatic, but it helps. You think about how modern separation between human and animal living spaces feels absolute. Here, it is flexible. Boundaries blur under pressure. Winter erases ideals and leaves only needs. Shelter becomes communal, whether planned or not. There is a curious note in some settlement letters describing how animals seemed calmer indoors during storms, less frantic than when left outside. Perhaps they sensed safety too. Perhaps warmth eased their stress. You glance toward the dim shape in the corner, breathing slow and steady, and it feels plausible. The fire crackles softly, joined now by the rhythmic sounds of shared life. The cabin feels fuller, warmer, louder in a gentle way. You are not alone with the storm anymore. The presence nearby grounds you, reminding you that survival here was rarely solitary. You adjust your position one last time, settling into the warmth that drifts your way. The smells and sounds fade into the background as sleep deepens. The animal presence becomes part of the cabin's rhythm, another element holding back the cold. Outside, the storm continues its work, indifferent to who shelters where. Inside, humans and animals share heat, breath, and space, bound together by necessity. You let your eyes close fully now, trusting the combined warmth to carry you through the next stretch of night. You are not fully asleep when the sound reaches you. It is sharp, sudden, and wrong in a way your body recognizes before your mind does. A crack, not from the fire, not from the wind. It comes from the walls themselves. You open your eyes, heart beating faster, and listen. The logs answer again, with a long, low pop, like a branch snapping underfoot. Cold has tightened the wood until it can hold no more, and now it releases that tension in short, startling bursts. These sounds are common in extreme winter weather, yet they never feel harmless when you are lying still in the dark. Frozen timber contracts as temperatures drop, and cabins built from whole logs respond audibly. This was so familiar to winter settlers that many could tell how cold it was outside simply by listening to their walls at night. Louder, sharper cracks meant deeper cold. Softer groans suggested a slow freeze rather than a sudden plunge. You remain still, counting breaths, letting your pulse slow. The noise does not repeat immediately. That matters. A single crack is normal. A series might signal structural strain. People learned these distinctions the hard way, lying awake as you are now, memorizing the language of wood. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about how much these noises contributed to chronic sleep disruption during long winters. Some argue that settlers became desensitized over time. Others believe the constant alertness took a toll on mental health. Listening now, half awake, you understand how even familiar sounds could keep the body on edge. Another crack echoes from the far wall, closer to the door. The animal in the corner shifts, reacting briefly, then settles again. That calms you more than anything else. Animals respond to real danger. Their ease suggests the cabin remains sound. You think about how these walls were assembled, logs stacked, notched, and pinned together, relying on weight and friction rather than nails. This allowed movement without collapse. A rigid structure might have shattered under the same conditions. Flexibility was survival, even if it sounded alarming. A lesser-known observation appears in some winter journals. Settlers wrote about hearing logs split during intense cold, creating hairline fractures that later filled with moisture and ice. These cracks rarely caused immediate failure, but they weakened insulation over time, demanding more chinking and repair. Winter damage often revealed itself slowly, one sound at a time. You shift slightly, adjusting your blankets, but remain mostly still. Movement creates noise, and noise masks the subtle changes you are listening for. The cabin quiets again, leaving only the wind and the steady breath of livestock. The fire settles, embers glowing low. A log collapses inward with a soft thud, sending a brief wash of warmth across the room. The sound is different from the wall noises. You note it without thinking, filing it away. This is safe. This is expected. Your mind wanders briefly, imagining the same sounds heard by people decades ago, centuries ago, in similar cabins scattered across vast distances. The experience is shared, even if the people never met. Winter teaches the same lessons wherever it finds wood and cold. Another pop comes from above, likely a roof beam responding to shifting snow weight. You glance upward, eyes straining in the low light. Nothing moves beyond what it should. The sound fades. You exhale slowly. There is a rhythm to these noises once you stop fighting them. Crack, pause, groan, silence. You let it wash over you, telling yourself the structure is doing what it was built to do, adjusting, surviving. People often imagine pioneer cabins as silent, peaceful places at night. The reality was more alive. Wood spoke, fire spoke, wind spoke. Silence was rare and often unsettling. You find yourself oddly comforted by the continued conversation around you. Your eyelids grow heavier again. Each crack jolts you a little less than the last. Familiarity dulls fear. The cabin holds, and you begin to trust it in a deeper way. Not because it is quiet, but because it continues to respond predictably. You shift your head slightly on the folded hide beneath it, finding a spot where the sounds feel distant rather than immediate. The animal breath nearby forms a steady counterpoint, grounding and warm. The night continues its long stretch. The walls will crack again. The roof will answer. You accept this now. Awareness softens into background vigilance, a state that allows rest without surrender. As sleep takes hold once more, the sounds blend together, no longer sharp, no longer urgent. They become part of the cabin's lullaby, rough but honest. You drift, carried by the knowledge that noise, here, often means survival. You sense the movement before you fully register it. The cabin shifts, just slightly, as a stronger gust of wind presses against one side and then slides away. It is not dramatic. Nothing tips or falls. Still, your body responds instantly, muscles tightening as if preparing to brace. Even lying down, you feel connected to the structure, as though your weight is part of what holds it steady. The wind finds the corners first. It curls around the notched logs, testing each seam, pushing and pulling in slow pulses. The cabin answers with a gentle sway, almost imperceptible unless you are paying attention. Early settlers often described this sensation, comparing it to standing inside a boat at anchor, rocked not by waves, but by air. Log cabins were never meant to be rigid boxes. Their strength came from mass and interlocking joints rather than stiffness. This allowed them to absorb force instead of resisting it outright. Builders in windy regions learned to embrace this flexibility, even if it unsettled newcomers. A cabin that moved slightly was less likely to fail. You focus on the feeling beneath you. The platform does not slide. The walls do not separate. The movement is shared, distributed. That matters. In poorly built structures, wind could pry logs apart or lift roofs unevenly. Here, the response feels coordinated, as if the cabin understands what is being asked of it. Outside, the storm changes pitch. Wind howls lower now, deeper, carrying snow in thick sheets that slap against the walls. You hear it strike, then scrape downward. The sound repeats again and again, hypnotic in its persistence. You let your breathing fall into the same rhythm. There has been debate among architectural historians about whether settlers intentionally designed cabins to sway, or whether it was simply an unavoidable result of available materials. Some point to deliberate joinery choices that encouraged movement. Others argue flexibility emerged accidentally and was later recognized as beneficial. Lying here, feeling the cabin respond rather than resist, the distinction feels unimportant. What matters is that it works. The animal nearby shifts again, hooves scraping softly. It adjusts its stance, compensating for the same movement you feel. This shared response reinforces your trust. Animals sense instability quickly. Its calm tells you more than any theory could. You hear the door creak faintly in its frame as pressure changes. The wooden bar holds firm. Settlers often reinforced doors heavily for winter, knowing wind could force them inward if left weak. A door failure during a storm meant instant heat loss and danger. You are grateful for the simple solidity of the bar, wedged in place by habit and experience. Another gust presses harder, and the cabin leans just enough for you to notice. Your stomach tightens, then relaxes when the pressure passes. The structure settles back, unharmed. This push and release continues, like a long conversation between wind and wood. You think briefly about cabins built on open plains, where there was little to break the wind. Those settlers faced even greater forces, relying on low profiles and careful placement to survive. In forested areas, trees absorbed some of the storm's energy, but falling limbs added their own risks. Every location came with trade-offs. A faint vibration runs through the floor as wind moves across the roof. Snow slides, then catches, then slides again. Each shift changes the load above you. The roof answers with a muted sound. Not a crack, but a settling sigh. You listen closely, noting the difference. This is adjustment, not failure. Your body relaxes gradually. The initial alertness fades as you accept the motion. The cabin is not collapsing. It is yielding just enough to endure. This understanding allows sleep to creep back in, though lightly, always lightly. Some settlers wrote about placing heavy objects along cabin walls during storms, believing added weight improved stability. Chests, barrels, even stones were moved strategically. Whether this made a measurable difference is unclear, but the practice reveals how people sought control where they could. Tonight, you rely instead on trust, built from observation. You roll onto your side, finding a position where the motion feels less pronounced. The blankets shift with you, then settle. The fire continues its low burn, unaffected by the wind's moods. That steadiness anchors the room. The storm does not relent. It circles, presses, retreats, and returns. The cabin responds each time, flexing and holding. You feel strangely comforted by this responsiveness. A structure that reacts feels alive. Alive things adapt. As your eyes close again, the movement fades into background sensation, like the rocking of a train or the sway of branches overhead. Your body stops bracing and starts resting. Awareness remains, but it softens, becoming less urgent. You drift in this half-sleep, aware of motion without fearing it. The wind continues its work outside, relentless and unseen. Inside, the cabin stands, not by resisting the storm, but by moving with it. Eventually, the swaying becomes part of the night's texture, no more alarming than the crackle of the fire or the breathing of animals. You let it carry you, trusting that when the wind finally eases, the cabin will still be here, and so will you. You wake with a dull, hollow sensation low in your body, a reminder that warmth alone does not quiet every need. Hunger makes itself known slowly, without urgency at first, then with a steady insistence. Your stomach tightens, then releases, as if testing whether you will respond. You do not, at least not right away. Food is precious, especially in winter, and nighttime eating is something you avoid unless absolutely necessary. The fire has burned down to a soft bed of embers. It still gives off heat, but less than before. The air feels cooler now, sharper against your cheeks. Hunger and cold often arrive together in winter cabins, reinforcing each other. Empty stomachs struggle to generate warmth. Warmth without fuel felt temporary. Frontier families entered winter with stores calculated carefully. Salted meat, dried corn, beans, root vegetables packed into cellars or buried pits. These supplies were meant to last months, not nights. Eating too much before sleep risked shortages later. Eating too little meant restless nights and weakened bodies. There was no perfect balance, only constant adjustment. You think about the last meal you had. Simple, heavy enough to sustain, but not indulgent. Many settlers preferred dense foods in winter, believing they burned longer in the body. Fatty cuts of meat were prized, not avoided. Calories were survival. Modern nutrition labels would not help much here. Experience did. Your hunger sharpens briefly, then settles into a quiet ache. You pull the blanket tighter around your middle, hoping warmth will distract you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. Tonight, the hunger lingers like a low hum beneath your thoughts. Personal accounts from winter settlements often mention children waking hungry in the night, asking for food that parents hesitated to give, not out of cruelty, but necessity. Small portions were reserved for daylight when work demanded strength. Nighttime was for endurance, not replenishment. There is continued discussion among scholars about how widespread winter hunger truly was on the frontier. Some argue that successful harvests and careful planning prevented severe shortages for many families. Others point to frequent crop failures, transport delays, and unpredictable weather that made hunger a recurring reality. Lying here now, feeling the dull pull in your stomach, you sense how even well-prepared households could feel the strain. You listen to the animal nearby, shifting slightly, chewing slowly. Livestock had their own winter feed, often hay saved from summer. Animals that ate well stayed warmer and healthier, reinforcing the importance of planning ahead. People understood this, sometimes prioritizing feed for animals even when their own meals were thin, knowing survival depended on both. The fire pops softly as an ember collapses inward. The sound draws your attention back to the room. You consider getting up to add a log, maybe warm a small portion of food, but movement risks losing the warmth you have built. You decide against it. Hunger is uncomfortable, but manageable. Cold is less forgiving. You place a hand over your stomach, feeling it rise and fall with your breathing. Slow breaths help. They give your body time to settle, to accept the current state. Settlers learned to live with mild hunger as a background condition during winter. It sharpened awareness but also drained energy. Balancing that was part of the season's challenge. You think about how hunger shapes sleep. Dreams become vivid. Thoughts wander. Rest comes in fragments. People wrote about waking often. Minds active. Bodies still. Hunger kept the night from fully loosening its grip. You feel that restlessness now. A gentle agitation beneath the blankets. A lesser-known practice appears in some winter letters. A small bite of food before sleep, often hard bread or a piece of dried meat, was sometimes used to quiet hunger just enough to rest. It was not a full meal, more a signal to the body that fuel remained. You consider it, then decide to wait. Supplies are limited. Morning is not far. The wind outside continues, but it feels less aggressive now, more steady. The storm has settled into a long, exhausting phase. You match your breathing to its rhythm, using the sound to anchor yourself. Hunger fades slightly as your attention shifts. You adjust your position, curling slightly inward. This conserves heat and seems to calm your stomach as well. Many people naturally slept this way in cold conditions, reducing exposed surface area. Bodies adapt quickly when conditions demand it. Your thoughts drift to spring, though you push them away gently. Thinking too far ahead makes the present feel heavier. Winter nights are survived one at a time. Focus narrows. This night, this cabin, this breath. The fire continues to glow faintly, enough to reassure but not enough to distract. The animal nearby breathes steadily, unconcerned. Its calm reminds you that hunger does not mean immediate danger. It is a signal, not a sentence. Your stomach clenches once more, then relaxes. You swallow, feeling dryness in your throat, and sip a little water. Sometimes thirst mimics hunger. The cold air dries you out quickly. The water helps, even if only slightly. As minutes pass, the ache dulls further. Fatigue begins to outweigh discomfort. Sleep approaches again, lighter than before, threaded with awareness but possible. You accept that hunger will be part of the night, like the cold and the sounds and the movement. It does not define the night. It accompanies it. You let your eyes close fully, trusting your body to wake you if hunger becomes urgent. For now, it does not. The cabin holds its quiet balance. The fire breathes softly. The storm continues outside, indifferent. Wrapped in layers, stomach not full but not empty, you drift again into shallow sleep. It is enough to carry you forward. 1 hour closer to morning, 1 hour closer to warmth and food and light. You wake with a strange numbness, not pain exactly, but absence. Your fingers feel thick, distant, as if they belong to someone else. For a moment you simply lie there, confused. Then instinct takes over. You flex your hands slowly, bringing them closer to your chest. Sensation returns in waves, first dull, then sharp, then aching. You breathe through it, knowing this feeling well enough to respect it. Cold does not always announce danger loudly. It whispers. Frostbite begins quietly, stealing warmth and feeling before the body reacts. People living through long winters learn to check themselves often, even in the dark, even when half asleep. Fingers, toes, nose, ears. These were the first places to suffer. You rub your hands together beneath the blankets, creating friction, encouraging blood to flow. It hurts, but the pain is reassuring. Pain means feeling has returned. Settlers knew this too. They feared numbness more than discomfort. Numbness meant time was running out. The fire has dimmed further, embers now faint and scattered. The room feels colder overall, but not dangerously so. Still, the edges of your body pay the price first. You shift, pulling blankets tighter around your feet, tucking fabric into gaps you missed earlier. Every small adjustment matters now. Winter medical knowledge on the frontier was limited, but experience taught clear lessons. Never rub frozen skin with snow, despite popular myths. Never place numb flesh directly against intense heat. Gradual warming saved tissue. Sudden heat destroyed it. These rules were learned through painful mistakes and passed along quietly. You test your toes next, wiggling them slowly, They respond, stiff but present. Relief spreads through you, easing the tightness in your chest. You curl your legs inward again, protecting them from the cold air that lingers near the floor. There is discussion among medical historians about how common frostbite injuries truly were, compared to how often they appear in dramatic frontier stories. Some argue that constant vigilance prevented many severe cases. Others note that minor frostbite was likely widespread, but underreported. Lying here now, guarding your hands and feet, you sense how easily damage could happen without anyone noticing until morning. You think about children sleeping in cabins like this, their smaller bodies losing heat faster. Parents checked them often during the night, touching cheeks and hands, waking them if skin felt too cold. Sleep for adults was lighter when children were present. Protection took priority over rest. A faint breeze slips through a gap near the door, colder than the rest of the air. You feel it brush your ankle and quickly block it with a fold of cloth. Drafts are dangerous not because they are strong, but because they are constant. A steady stream of cold air can chill one spot for hours, while the rest of the body feels warm enough. You press your foot against the warmed stone you placed earlier near the fire. It is cooler now, but still slightly warm compared to the floor. The contrast helps. Heat seeps slowly back into your skin. You breathe steadily, letting the process take its time. Some winter letters describe people waking with frost forming on their hair or eyelashes, breath freezing as it left their mouths. That was often the line between discomfort and danger. You touch your hair briefly. It is cold, but flexible. No ice. Another quiet relief. Your ears feel stiff too, pressed against the pillow. You adjust, covering them more fully. Ears were particularly vulnerable, exposed and often forgotten. Frostbitten ears left lasting damage, something settlers recognized when it was already too late. You refuse to make that mistake tonight. The animal nearby shifts again, releasing a wave of warmth that drifts across the room. You welcome it, pressing your hands outward slightly to catch what you can. Shared heat, even indirect, makes a difference when fire wanes. Your mind sharpens briefly, alert from the cold. Sleep retreats. This alertness is not panic, but awareness. You scan your body again, fingers tingling, toes aching but responsive, nose cold but sensitive. You are still within safe limits. There is a lesser-known detail mentioned in some homestead accounts. People sometimes slept with woolen caps pulled low over their ears, even indoors, to reduce heat loss. Head coverings mattered. Heat escaped upward quickly. You reach for a piece of cloth and wrap it loosely around your head, feeling immediate improvement. You settle again, careful not to disturb the fragile warmth you have rebuilt. The blankets shift, then rest. Your breathing slows. Pain fades to a dull throb, then to nothing at all. Sensation stabilizes. The storm outside sounds distant now, its earlier violence softened into a steady rush. Inside, the cabin feels colder but calmer. You have crossed a difficult part of the night, where fire dims and bodies must compensate. You think about how many winter injuries happened not during work, but during rest. Stillness invited cold. Sleep required trust, but not neglect. People survived by waking often enough to intervene before damage set in. You accept that sleep will remain light. That is fine. You do not need depth, only enough rest to restore strength. You tuck your hands into a warmer pocket beneath the blankets and keep them there, resisting the urge to stretch out. Minutes pass, then more. The numbness does not return. Instead, warmth holds, fragile but present. Your body relaxes gradually, releasing the tension that came with fear. As your eyes close again, you keep a quiet promise to yourself. You will wake if the cold shifts. You will respond before it steals feeling again. This vigilance is not exhausting anymore. It is routine. The cabin holds its breath with you. The fire sleeps lightly. The animal nearby remains calm. Wrapped in layers and awareness, you drift back into rest, knowing that for now, frostbite has been kept at bay, and morning inches closer with every slow breath. You become aware of movement beside you, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Another body shifts closer, careful not to wake you fully. A shared blanket lifts slightly, then settles again. In cabins like this, sleep was rarely solitary. Space was limited, and warmth was something people pooled together. Children slept wherever heat gathered most reliably. Sometimes that meant the center of the room, closer to the fire. Other times it meant pressed against parents or siblings, bodies lined up like stacked firewood. Elders were positioned where temperatures stayed steadier, away from drafts, but not too close to sparks. These arrangements were practical, not sentimental, shaped by long nights of trial and error. You feel the gentle warmth of another person nearby, radiating through layers of cloth. It changes everything. Cold that felt persistent moments ago softens almost immediately. Shared heat fills the small space between you, creating a pocket of comfort that no blanket alone could provide. Frontier households were often large by necessity, not choice. Extended families lived together, sharing labor and resources. Winter sleep reflected this closeness. Beds were rare. Platforms, floors, and pallets filled instead. People adjusted their expectations quickly. Privacy yielded to survival. You notice how breathing patterns begin to align. Slow inhale, slow exhale. Bodies unconsciously synchronize when resting close together. This rhythm calms you, easing the last traces of tension from your muscles. Sleep deepens slightly, encouraged by the steady presence beside you. There is debate among social historians about how constant physical closeness affected family dynamics on the frontier. Some suggest it strengthened bonds and mutual awareness. Others argue it intensified stress and conflict. Lying here now, wrapped in shared warmth, you can imagine both outcomes. Intimacy under pressure magnifies everything. The blanket shifts again as someone adjusts a knee or shoulder. The movement is familiar, accepted without comment. Nighttime adjustments were common, done carefully to preserve warmth. Waking others was avoided when possible, but sometimes unavoidable. No one complained. Complaints wasted energy. You think about how children learn to sleep through discomfort early, guided by example rather than instruction. They learned where to place hands to stay warm, how to curl inward, when to wake an adult. These lessons were absorbed quietly, night after night. A lesser-known detail appears in a few settlement diaries. Some families assigned specific sleeping positions during winter, changing them on a schedule so no one bore the coldest spot for too long. Fairness mattered, even when survival was the main goal. Warmth became something to distribute, not hoard. The fire flickers low, casting just enough light to outline shapes in the room. Faces are mostly hidden now, turned inward, eyes closed. The cabin feels full, occupied not just by bodies but by shared purpose. Everyone here depends on everyone else making it through the night. You shift slightly to accommodate the weight beside you. The platform creaks softly, then quiets. The animal nearby remains calm, its presence now part of the background. Heat from multiple sources overlaps, creating a more stable warmth than fire alone ever could. Sleep grows heavier, but awareness does not disappear completely. You remain tuned to movement, to changes in breathing, to the subtle cues that tell you everyone is still warm enough. This collective vigilance is exhausting, but it works. Outside, the storm continues its steady work. Inside, bodies press together, forming a barrier against the cold that no wall could fully provide. You feel safer now, not because the night is less dangerous, but because you are not facing it alone. Your thoughts soften further, edges blurring. The closeness brings comfort that feels ancient, instinctive. Humans have shared warmth like this for as long as nights have been cold. The cabin is just a frame around something much older. Breathing slows, muscles relax completely. The shared heat holds steady. Sleep takes you more fully this time, wrapped not just in blankets, but in the quiet assurance of others nearby. The light is the next thing you notice, or rather the lack of it. Even with your eyes closed, you can tell the oil lamp has been turned down to its lowest wick, or extinguished entirely. Darkness here is not gentle. It is thick, pressing in from every direction, swallowing the edges of the room until distance becomes meaningless. You open your eyes and see almost nothing, just a faint, uneven glow from the hearth embers, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. When pioneers put out their lamps at night, they did so deliberately. Oil was valuable, wicks burned down, glass chimneys cracked. Light after dark was never casual. Most families relied on firelight alone once sleep began, accepting the darkness as part of the night rather than fighting it. You feel that acceptance settle in now, a quiet agreement with the absence of sight. The darkness changes how you listen. Every sound grows larger, more defined. The wind outside feels closer. The breathing of others nearby becomes clearer. Even your own movements sound louder than they should. Without light, your senses rearrange themselves, assigning new importance to touch and sound. Shadows linger in your mind, even when your eyes see nothing. Shapes you noticed earlier, knots in wood, hanging tools, uneven beams, all return as memory rather than vision. Your brain fills in gaps, sometimes inventing movement where there is none. Many people describe this as one of the most unsettling parts of winter nights, not fear exactly, but heightened awareness. There are accounts from the period describing how complete darkness altered sleep patterns. Without artificial light, people drifted into rest earlier and woke more often. Night was longer, heavier, time stretched. People marked hours by fire tending, by shifts in wind, by their own bodies waking and settling again. You lie still, letting your eyes adjust even though there is little to adjust to. The faint glow from the embers barely outlines the hearthstones. Everything else dissolves into black. You feel the presence of the walls rather than see them, solid and close. A small sound near the door makes you tense briefly, just wood settling, responding to temperature changes. In the dark, these sounds feel more personal, as if the cabin itself is moving around you. You remind yourself that nothing has changed, only the light is gone. Some settlers left lamps burning through the night during severe storms, believing light provided reassurance or warded off danger. Others avoided it, knowing that light wasted resources and encouraged wakefulness. There is disagreement among historians about how common overnight lighting truly was. Many journals suggest darkness was the norm, accepted even when it made nights more psychologically demanding. You think about how modern darkness rarely reaches this depth. Streetlights, screens, clocks, all leak light into sleep. Here, the night is complete. It wraps around you fully, leaving no visual distractions. This darkness does not entertain or comfort. It simply exists. Your thoughts slow in response. Without light, there is less to process. Images fade, ideas soften, even worries lose sharp edges. The mind drifts differently in true darkness, turning inward rather than outward. You feel the blanket rise and fall with shared breathing nearby. The warmth remains steady. That matters more than light now. You adjust your head slightly, finding a position where the darkness feels less pressing, even though you know it has not changed. A lesser-known detail appears in some winter letters. People wrote about how darkness made cabins feel smaller at night, compressing space and time. Others described the opposite, a sense of vastness, as if the walls disappeared into the black. Which one you feel seems to depend on your mood and fatigue. Tonight, the darkness feels close, enclosing, protective in a strange way. The fire shifts, sending a brief flicker of light across the ceiling. For a second, beams and logs reappear, then vanish again. The momentary glimpse reassures you. The cabin is still here. Everything is where it should be. You close your eyes again, though it makes little difference. Darkness behind eyelids blends seamlessly with darkness beyond them. Your breathing deepens, guided by the absence of visual stimulation. The night encourages rest whether you want it or not. In this kind of darkness, imagination can wander. You picture snow piling against the walls, wind sculpting drifts, moonlight hidden behind clouds. These images are faint, like half-remembered dreams, drifting in and out without urgency. Some people found this darkness comforting, a clear boundary between day and night. Others found it oppressive. You sense both reactions within yourself. There is comfort in being unseen, in not having to perform or respond visually. There is also vulnerability in not being able to see what surrounds you. You listen closely again. No new sounds. The animal nearby breathes steadily. The roof murmurs softly. The wind has settled into a lower, more constant tone. These cues tell you it is safe enough to let go a little more. Your body relaxes further, muscles releasing tension you did not realize you were holding. Without light, there is no reason to stay alert. The night feels final, complete. Morning is far away, and nothing you do now will hurry it. Sleep begins to pull you deeper, not abruptly, but gradually, like sinking into warm water. The darkness supports this descent, removing distractions and softening thoughts. As you drift, the cabin becomes less a place and more a sensation. Warmth, breath, stillness. The darkness wraps around all of it, holding the night together. You let it carry you, trusting that light will return when it is ready. For now, the dark does its quiet work, guiding you toward deeper rest in the long winter night. Sleep does not stay smooth for long. It bends and twists, shaped by the cold, the sounds, and the weight of the night itself. Your dreams feel thin, easily torn, stitched together from memory and sensation. You dream of walking through deep snow, each step heavy, your breath loud in your ears. The cabin follows you even there, its walls rising and falling like a slow breath. Cold seeps into the dream, blurring its edges. You are aware of your body even while resting. This kind of sleep is never complete surrender. It is layered, like the blankets over you, each level offering a little protection, but never total escape. People who wrote about winter nights often described their dreams as restless and vivid. Hunger, cold, and constant alertness shaped what the mind produced. Dreams returned again and again to themes of warmth, movement, and shelter. Fire appeared often, sometimes comforting, sometimes threatening. You feel that now, the fire in your dream flickering unpredictably. You shift in your sleep, and the dream shifts with you. Snow becomes ash, wind becomes breath. The transition is smooth, almost seamless. Your mind does not resist. It adapts, just as your body does. There is discussion among sleep researchers who study historical patterns about whether such fragmented rest was actually harmful or simply different. Some suggest people adapted to lighter, more segmented sleep without lasting effects. Others believe chronic disruption increased fatigue and stress over time. You drift between these possibilities, too tired to care, which is true tonight. Your dream brings you back to the cabin. You see the hearth glowing brighter than it should, sparks rising dangerously close to the roof. You reach out to adjust it, but your hand moves slowly, as if underwater. The image dissolves before fear fully forms, replaced by darkness and the steady sound of breathing. A small noise in the real world pulls you closer to waking. The animal nearby shifts, releasing a puff of warm air. The dream absorbs it, turning it into a warm wind across an imagined field. You remain asleep, but lightly. Some settlers believe dreams during winter carried warnings, messages shaped by hardship. Others dismissed them as the result of discomfort. Either way, dreams were taken seriously when nights were long and days short. You sense that seriousness now, even if you do not fully believe in it. Your body curls tighter without conscious thought, conserving heat. In the dream, you huddle beside others, sharing warmth. The overlap between waking and dreaming becomes complete. The cabin exists in both places at once. You feel your jaw relax, breath slowing further. The dream softens, losing sharp images and becoming more like sensation. Warmth here, pressure there, sound without shape. This is deeper sleep, fragile but real. Outside the dream, the storm continues. Inside it, the wind fades. The roof no longer creaks. Everything grows still. You float in this quiet space, neither fully awake nor fully asleep. A memory surfaces in the dream of summer warmth, of sun on skin, of open air. It feels distant, almost unreal, but comforting. Many people dreamed of summer and winter, a mental refuge from the present. You let the image linger briefly before it dissolves. Your breathing remains steady. The fire in the real cabin burns low, but enough to hold the room. The darkness remains complete. The dream settles into something like peace. As time passes, you slip into a deeper layer of rest. The mind quiets further. Thoughts lose words. Sensations blend together. This is as close to deep sleep as winter nights often allowed. Eventually, even the dream fades. There is only warmth and weight, and the slow rhythm of breath. The cabin holds you. The blankets hold you. The night holds you. For a while, you are simply resting, not watching, not listening, just being carried forward through the cold hours, one breath at a time. You wake to a faint, unfamiliar stillness. The wind has softened, its earlier force reduced to a low, distant murmur. The storm has not ended, but it has paused, gathering itself elsewhere. In this quiet, new details make themselves known. The air feels sharper again, colder than before, and when you exhale, your breath hangs visibly for a moment before fading. As your eyes adjust to the dim glow of dying embers, you notice something strange along the inner walls. Tiny white crystals cling to the logs, delicate and sharp-edged. Frost has formed inside the cabin. It outlines cracks, settles where warm breath met cold wood, and sparkles faintly when the firelight flickers. This was a familiar sight in severe winters. When outside temperatures plunged far below freezing, even a well-sealed cabin could not prevent moisture from freezing on interior surfaces. Breath, sweat, and cooking steam condensed on cold walls and turned to ice. People woke to find frost decorating their homes like a silent snowfall. You reach out and touch one of the crystals. It melts instantly beneath your finger, leaving a dark, damp mark on the log. Cold bites at your skin again. The wall is bitterly cold, despite the fire that burned through the night. Logs store cold deeply, releasing it slowly, long after outside temperatures rise. Some winter diaries describe mornings where hair and blankets were dusted with frost, moisture from breath freezing overnight. It was not unusual to shake ice from bedding before getting up. You glance at the edge of your blankets. They feel stiff in places, chilled where breath escaped during sleep. There is disagreement among historians about how often interior frost occurred compared to how often it was mentioned. Some believe it was common enough to be unremarkable, noted only during especially brutal cold. Others argue it was frequent and simply accepted as part of winter life. Standing here now, watching frost melt and reform slowly, you understand how it could become routine. You sit up carefully, joints stiff from cold and hours of limited movement. The platform creaks softly beneath you. As you move, flakes of ice loosen from the wall and fall silently to the floor, disappearing into the darkness below. The fire needs attention. Embers glow faintly, barely alive. You stir them gently with a stick, sending a small shower of sparks upward. A thin flame appears, then grows. Light returns in pulses, revealing more frost along the walls, shimmering briefly before retreating as warmth spreads. Animals nearby stir as well, reacting to the change. Warmth encourages movement. The shared space begins to wake slowly, one breath at a time. Winter mornings did not begin abruptly. They unfolded cautiously, bodies reluctant to leave the fragile warmth of sleep. You rub your hands together again, feeling stiffness ease gradually. Cold has a way of settling into joints overnight, especially when bodies remain still for long hours. Settlers often complained of aching hands and knees in the morning, symptoms that lingered through the season. You take a deeper breath and feel the cold air fill your lungs. It is clean, sharp, almost painful. Smoke is minimal now, the fire too low to overwhelm the space. Frost melts in thin streams down the logs as heat returns, darkening the wood. A lesser-known note from some homesteads mentions collecting interior frost to use as water when supplies ran low. It was clean enough, formed from breath and steam, and melted quickly near the fire. The idea feels practical, even if unappealing. You look around the cabin, now partially visible. Frost outlines the structure, revealing every seam and imperfection. It is a map of where heat escaped and cold entered, a visual lesson left by the night. These patterns guided later repairs, showing settlers exactly where to focus their efforts. As the fire strengthens, the frost retreats slowly, leaving behind dampness that will soon turn cold again if the fire falters. Everything here exists in cycles: warm, cold, melt, freeze. Survival depends on keeping those cycles from tipping too far in either direction. You stretch carefully, muscles protesting but waking. Outside, the storm remains quiet for now. Inside, the cabin breathes again, adjusting to the returning warmth. Morning is not fully here yet, but the night has loosened its grip. You take one last look at the fading frost, committing the image to memory. It is proof of how hard the night pressed in, and how narrowly warmth held. Another winter night survived, not comfortably, but successfully. You move slowly now, careful with each step as your feet meet the cold floor. The night has left its mark on the cabin, and the damage is subtle, but clear if you know how to look. Thin lines of light appear where frost traced seams earlier. Damp patches darken the logs where ice melted and seeped inward. Winter never passes without changing something. You kneel near the wall again, touching the chinking you packed hours before. Some of it has held, some has cracked and pulled away, leaving narrow gaps that breathe cold air into the room. This is expected. Cabins shift constantly in winter, wood tightening and loosening with temperature changes. Repairs are not signs of failure. They are part of living here. Settlers often began their mornings with maintenance before anything else. Before cooking, before chores, before planning the day. Keeping the cabin sound came first because everything else depended on it. You feel that urgency now as you gather tools and materials, knowing the next storm will test whatever you leave undone. You scrape away loose clay with a stick, careful not to widen the gap. The smell of damp earth rises as you work. You mix fresh clay with straw, pressing it into place with steady pressure. Your fingers are stiff, but the motion warms them. Repair becomes a way to wake the body as well as the house. Some frontier accounts describe children assigned to help with chinking repairs, learning early how walls behaved in cold weather. They learned where cracks reappeared each winter and which seams needed constant attention. Knowledge passed quietly, through repetition rather than instruction. There is continued debate among researchers about how often cabins required full re-chinking versus small daily fixes. Some evidence suggests major repairs happened seasonally. Other sources imply constant patching, especially during long cold spells. Working here now, you suspect both are true. Big repairs prepared the cabin. Small fixes kept it alive. You move along the wall, pressing, smoothing, checking. Frost earlier showed you exactly where heat escaped. Those pale outlines are now guides. Winter teaches directly, leaving marks that cannot be ignored. Near the door, the bottom seam has widened again. Cold air slips through easily there. You wedge a strip of cloth tighter, then add clay around it. The solution looks rough, but it blocks the draft. Many winter repairs looked like this. Effective, not elegant. You stand and stretch your back, feeling muscles complain. Outside, the storm remains quiet, but clouds still hang low. The pause may be brief. You work quickly, not rushing, but aware of time. Winter weather rewards preparation and punishes delay. You glance up at the roofline from inside, checking for signs of stress. No new cracks, no sagging. Snow likely slid off during the night, reducing the load. Still, you make a mental note to inspect it later from outside if conditions allow. The fire crackles behind you, stronger now. Warmth spreads unevenly, touching your hands and face while your back remains cold. You rotate occasionally, sharing heat across your body. Repair work rarely happens in comfort. A lesser-known detail appears in some homestead records. People sometimes reinforced interior walls with additional planks or hides during winter, not as insulation, but to catch falling, chinking, and reduce drafts if repairs failed overnight. You consider adding an extra layer near your sleeping spot later. You notice dampness along the floor where melted frost pooled. Dirt floors absorb moisture quickly, turning cold and heavy. Some settlers scattered ash or dry sand in these spots to absorb dampness and reduce chill. You scoop a handful of ash from the hearth and spread it thinly, watching it darken as it drinks in moisture. As you work, the cabin feels more cooperative, less strained. Repairs calm the structure in a way that is hard to explain. Gaps close, drafts soften. The space feels steadier, more contained. It is not imagination. Small changes affect airflow and temperature more than you might expect. There is disagreement among building historians about whether frontier cabins were truly durable or simply maintained constantly enough to appear so. Standing here with clay on your hands, you lean toward the second explanation. Durability was not a property of materials alone. It came from attention. You pause to listen. The cabin sounds different now. Fewer whistles from the walls. The wind outside brushes past without finding easy entry. These auditory cues matter. Sound tells you when a repair has worked. The animal nearby shifts again, hooves scraping softly. It snorts once, then settles. Its warmth adds to the room, but you are careful not to work too close. Repair work and livestock require awareness. Startle an animal, and accidents happen. You move to the opposite wall, checking seams near your sleeping platform. These held better, protected from the worst wind. Still, you add a small amount of clay where a hairline crack has formed. Preventive work saves effort later. As your hands warm, movement becomes easier. You find a rhythm. Press, smooth, step back, check, adjust. The process is calming, almost meditative. Winter mornings often began like this, quietly, without ceremony. Outside, light begins to change slightly. Not true daylight yet, but a thinning of darkness. The sky shifts from deep black to a heavy grey. Morning is coming, whether the storm agrees or not. You clean your hands as best you can, rubbing them with a cloth. Clay remains under your nails, a reminder of the work done. The cabin feels more secure now, ready for whatever the next hours bring. You stand in the center of the room and take a slow breath. The air feels steadier, warmer. Repairs hold. For now. Winter survival is built from these moments. Not heroics, not grand plans, just careful attention paid again and again. The night tested the cabin. The morning answers back. You glance once more at the walls, now darker where frost melted, seams sealed and reinforced. They will move again. Cracks will return. You accept that. Maintenance is never finished here. It is simply paused until the next need arises. With the immediate repairs done, you turn toward the fire and the day ahead, knowing the cabin has gained a few more hours of strength. In winter, that is often enough. You step closer to the doorway and peer outside, careful not to let too much cold rush in. The land beyond the cabin looks different now, reshaped by wind and snow. Drifts pile high in some places and vanish entirely in others. This is when you are reminded that not all winters were endured the same way. Where you are mattered as much as how you built. In forested regions, cabins benefited from trees that broke the wind and trapped snow away from walls. Snow piled among trunks instead of pressing directly against homes. Firewood was closer, easier to gather, even in deep winter. In these places, sleep came with its own challenges, but the landscape offered some protection. The woods held warmth in ways open land never could. You imagine a cabin on the Great Plains, standing alone under an endless sky. There, wind had nothing to slow it. Settlers dug cabins partially into the ground when they could, using earth itself as insulation. Sleeping below ground level reduced exposure and stabilized temperatures, but it came with other dangers. Dampness, darkness, limited ventilation. Each solution solved one problem and introduced another. In the Appalachian regions, cabins often tucked into hillsides, using natural slopes to block prevailing winds. Stone was more available there, sometimes used to reinforce walls or build sturdier chimneys. Nights in those cabins sounded different. Less howl, more hush. Snow fell softer, but cold lingered longer in shaded valleys. There is ongoing discussion among historians about whether regional cabin designs were fully intentional adaptations or simply reflections of available materials and traditions settlers already knew. Some argue that people learned quickly and adjusted building styles deliberately. Others suggest most adaptations happened slowly, over generations. You sense both forces at work as you consider how different this night would feel elsewhere. In northern territories, winters were longer and darker. Cabins were often smaller to conserve heat, with lower ceilings and tighter spaces. Sleep there meant enduring months of cold rather than weeks. People developed routines that accepted darkness and stillness as constants. Rest became something to ration carefully. Further south, winters were shorter but more unpredictable. Sudden freezes caught people off guard. Cabins built for milder conditions struggled when cold arrived unexpectedly. Sleep during those storms was often more frantic, marked by rushed repairs and improvised solutions. You think about how sleep patterns changed with latitude. Longer nights meant more time indoors, more time lying awake, listening. Shorter nights compressed rest into fewer hours. Either way, winter reshaped how people understood sleep itself, turning it into a tool rather than a luxury. A lesser-known observation from travelers moving between regions notes how unfamiliar winter sounds unsettled newcomers. A person used to forest silence found plains winds terrifying. Someone from open land felt uneasy in deep woods where snow muffled everything. Sleep suffered until familiarity returned. You step back inside and close the door gently. The cabin settles into its own quiet again. The comparison lingers in your mind. Same logs, same fire, same blankets, yet the experience of night would shift dramatically with geography. This awareness deepens your appreciation of the choices made here. The roof pitch, the wall thickness, the placement of the door. These details reflect lessons learned from this land, not another. Sleep here is shaped by this place, these winds, this cold. You sit near the hearth and let warmth soak into you again. Thinking too broadly can pull you out of the moment. Survival remains local, immediate. The storm outside is the one you must face, not the imagined storms elsewhere. Still, the idea stays with you. Across vast distances, people lay awake in similar cabins, listening to different winds, fighting different cold. Their nights shared purpose, even when conditions differed. You breathe deeply and let the thoughts settle. The cabin creaks softly, adjusting to the new day. Repairs hold, fire burns, animals stir. Morning continues, its slow arrival. You know that another night will come, and it will bring its own challenges. Geography will shape those too. For now, you stay present, grounded in this place, this cabin, this quiet stretch between storms. You sit quietly for a moment, watching the fire settle into a steady burn again, and you realize that much of what kept you alive through the night did not originate with the people who built this cabin. Long before logs were stacked and chinked, others lived on this land and learned how winter behaved. Some of that knowledge slipped into settler life slowly, sometimes without acknowledgement, carried through observation rather than instruction. You think about how the cabin itself borrows ideas, the emphasis on insulation, the understanding that wind direction matters. the habit of keeping entrances low and tight. Indigenous winter shelters varied widely, but they shared a deep respect for heat retention and airflow. These principles traveled quietly across cultures, reshaped into log walls and hearths. In many regions, native communities taught newcomers how to use the land to reduce exposure, choosing sites protected by hills, avoiding low areas where cold air pooled, orienting entrances away from prevailing winds. These choices mattered as much as wall thickness. Sleep improved when the land itself offered shelter. You recall how evergreen branches were sometimes laid beneath bedding or woven into walls. This practice came directly from indigenous winter camps, where pine and spruce boughs created insulation and lifted bodies off frozen ground. Settlers adopted the idea quickly, recognizing its effectiveness. The scent of resin often filled cabins in winter, a small comfort carried indoors. There is evidence in early frontier records that some settlers learned to manage fire differently after watching native winter practices. Fires were kept smaller and more controlled, with an understanding that steady heat mattered more than bright flames. Large fires wasted fuel and created smoke. Smaller, banked fires lasted through the night. This lesson likely saved lives. You notice how you instinctively curled inward during sleep, conserving warmth. That posture mirrors practices used in many indigenous cultures, where group sleeping and body positioning minimized heat loss. Shared warmth was not an emergency measure. It was standard winter behavior. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how much indigenous knowledge was intentionally shared versus quietly adopted. Some accounts describe direct teaching. Others suggest settlers learned by watching from a distance, copying what worked. Either way, winter survival skills crossed boundaries more often than written histories admit. You think about clothing as well. Layering, the use of animal hides, the importance of keeping moisture away from skin. These ideas existed long before European settlement. Native winter clothing emphasized breathability and insulation rather than bulk. Settlers gradually adapted, though not always quickly enough. A lesser-known detail appears in some early trade records. Indigenous communities exchanged not just goods, but advice. How to recognize dangerous cold, how to treat numbness, how to read weather signs that signaled severe storms. Sleep safety was part of that knowledge, even if it was not framed that way. You glance at the walls again, seeing frost patterns fading. The way moisture collected and froze overnight is something indigenous builders understood well. Many traditional shelters used materials that absorbed and released moisture differently than logs, reducing interior frost. Settlers struggled with this, adapting only partially. There is debate among researchers about whether log cabins were truly suited for extreme cold compared to indigenous winter dwellings. Some argue that cabins were inferior, requiring constant fire and repair. Others note that cabins provided durability and storage that mobile shelters did not. The truth likely lies in context. Each solution fit a way of life. You feel a quiet respect settle in as you think about this exchange of knowledge. Survival here was never purely individual. It was cumulative, built from generations of experience layered on top of each other, even when those layers were not acknowledged. You reach down and adjust a piece of evergreen you placed near the platform earlier. The scent rises faintly as the needles warm. It reminds you that not all wisdom comes from books or blueprints. Some of it comes from watching what works and letting go of pride. The fire pops softly, sending a brief wave of warmth across the room. You imagine winter nights spent in lodges, earth shelters, or bark-covered structures, where heat moved differently, where smoke escaped through central openings, where sleep followed rhythms shaped by long familiarity with the land. Settlers often wrote about learning to endure winter. Indigenous communities wrote about living with it. The difference shows in how sleep was approached, not as something to protect fiercely, but as something that adapted naturally to cold and darkness. You sit with that thought, letting it settle. The cabin around you is a hybrid space, European in form, indigenous in many of its strategies, even if unspoken. Your night was shaped by both. Outside, the landscape remains quiet, snow resting where it fell. Inside, the cabin holds warmth a little more effectively now, thanks to knowledge gathered from many sources over many winters. You stand and stretch, feeling stiffness ease. The day will demand work, but the night has already taught its lessons. Survival is rarely about invention alone. It is about listening, observing, and respecting what came before. As you move toward the hearth, you carry that awareness with you. The warmth you feel is not just from fire and walls, but from generations of understanding layered into every choice you made through the night. You notice the dampness before you feel sick. The air carries a heaviness now, not smoky, not cold exactly, but weighted with moisture. It settles into your chest when you breathe deeply. Winter cabins trapped warmth, but they also trapped damp air, and that combination shaped health in ways people did not fully understand at the time. You cough once, quietly, more from irritation than illness. The sound echoes softly in the small space. Many settlers accepted coughing as a normal part of winter, something to be endured rather than questioned. Cold air, smoke, and moisture worked together, irritating lungs night after night. Cabins sealed tightly against drafts reduced heat loss, but they also limited airflow. Moisture from breath, cooking, and melting frost lingered. Walls darkened. Bedding grew heavy. Dampness crept into clothing and bones alike. People knew damp cold felt worse than dry cold, even if they could not explain why. Morning routines often included airing out bedding when weather allowed. Blankets were draped over fences or branches, letting wind and sun draw out moisture. On stormy days, this was impossible. Bedding stayed wet. Sleep that night suffered for it. You glance at your blankets now, feeling their weight, sensing the cold they hold. There is ongoing discussion among medical historians about how winter cabin conditions contributed to illness. Some argue that respiratory infections spread easily in cramped, damp spaces. Others point out that malnutrition and exhaustion weakened immune systems first. The cabin created the environment, but hunger and labor finished the work. You think about how sickness altered sleep. Fever brought restless nights. Chills returned even beside strong fires. Families took turns tending the ill, waking often to check breathing and warmth. Sleep became a shared responsibility rather than a personal need. Children and elders were most vulnerable. Smaller bodies lost heat quickly. Older lungs struggled with smoke and cold air. Winter deaths often came quietly, after days of weakness rather than sudden injury. These losses rarely made headlines, but they shaped frontier life deeply. A lesser-known detail appears in some settlement letters. People believed certain woods used for fuel caused more illness than others. Whether this was true or not, the belief guided choices. Some avoided burning green wood indoors, claiming it produced heavier smoke and headaches. Practical observation often passed as medical theory. You open the door briefly, letting fresh air rush in despite the cold. The change is immediate. The air feels sharper, cleaner. You close the door again quickly, sealing warmth back inside. This brief exchange was a common practice, balancing breath against heat. You feel your lungs relax slightly. The cough does not return. For now, the air is manageable, but you understand how quickly conditions could turn. A few days of storms, no chance to air bedding, a weak fire. Illness followed patterns as predictable as weather. You think about how people treated sickness at night. Herbs steeped near the fire, warm stones wrapped in cloth, extra blankets layered on trembling bodies. Care happened quietly, guided by experience rather than science. Sleep during illness was often shallow and broken. Dreams grew vivid, time blurred. Caregivers slept in short bursts, always listening. Winter nights stretched longer when someone was sick. You feel grateful for your strength this morning. Tired, stiff, hungry, but whole. The night challenged you, but it did not take more than it gave. That balance could shift quickly. You do not forget that. The fire burns steadily now, drying the air slowly. Dampness lifts from the walls in faint waves. The cabin smells cleaner as moisture retreats. This is temporary relief, but relief nonetheless. You adjust your bedding, spreading it closer to the fire where it can dry. This small task improves the next night before it arrives. Winter survival depended on thinking ahead, even when exhausted. Outside, the sky remains grey, heavy with promise of more snow. Inside, you breathe a little easier. The cabin holds warmth, but you remember not to let it hold too much moisture. Illness is always near in winter. It waits in damp corners and tired bodies. Sleep does not chase it away completely, but good habits slow its approach. You take a deep breath and let it out slowly. For now, your lungs are clear. Your body holds. The night has passed, without sickness taking root. That is never guaranteed. It is simply earned, one careful choice at a time. You settle back against the wall, letting the quiet of early morning surround you, and you notice a different kind of weight now. Not cold, not hunger, something heavier and less visible. The long stretch of winter presses on the mind as much as the body. Nights like this do not end when the storm fades. They repeat, again and again, until time itself feels altered. Sleep in winter cabins was never just about rest. It was about endurance. Darkness arrived early and lingered. Days shortened until work and light felt compressed into a narrow band between dawn and dusk. People lay awake longer, not always from discomfort, but from thoughts that refused to settle. You stare at the wall, watching the firelight flicker faintly, and feel how easily the mind drifts inward when the world outside shrinks. Loneliness crept in, even when others slept nearby. Silence amplified worries. The future felt distant and uncertain. Winter magnified everything that went unsaid during busy months. Some settlers wrote about the strange quiet of winter nights, when even wildlife seemed to retreat. Without birds or insects, sound dropped away, leaving only wind and the occasional crack of wood. This silence unsettled people used to constant noise. Sleep came harder in that stillness. There is continued discussion among historians about how isolation affected mental health on the frontier. Some argue that community bonds strengthened in winter, with shared stories and routines providing comfort. Others suggest anxiety and melancholy were common, especially during long storms when travel was impossible. Sitting here now, you feel how both could be true. You think about how people filled their evenings before sleep: quiet conversation, storytelling, simple games, reading aloud when light allowed. These activities eased the transition into night, giving the mind something to hold on to before darkness took over completely. Without them, the silence felt too large. Winter sleep also meant confronting fear more directly. Fear of storms, fear of illness, fear of running out of food. These worries surfaced most clearly at night, when work could no longer distract from them. People learned to manage fear through routine rather than reassurance. Checking the fire, touching the walls, listening. You notice how your own thoughts slow when you focus on small, concrete tasks. Adjusting a blanket, shifting position, counting breaths. These actions ground you, pulling attention away from abstract worry and back into the body. This skill was essential. Without it, nights stretched unbearably long. A lesser-known note from some homesteads describes winter sadness that lifted almost immediately when days lengthened again. The change could be dramatic. Mood improved, sleep deepened, energy returned. This suggests how strongly light shaped emotional health, even before people had language for it. You think about how modern life fills darkness with artificial light and noise, masking the psychological effects of winter. Here, nothing distracts from it. The season asserts itself fully. People adapted by accepting slower rhythms rather than fighting them. Your breathing remains steady as you rest against the wall. The animal nearby shifts slightly, then stills. Shared presence helps. Even without conversation, knowing others are near eases the mind. Isolation is felt most sharply when alone. You feel a quiet determination settle in. Winter does not need to be conquered tonight. It only needs to be endured, one night at a time, one careful sleep at a time. This mindset carries people through months that might otherwise overwhelm them. The fire crackles softly, offering a focal point. Watching flames gave the mind something gentle to follow, something predictable in a season of uncertainty. Many people found comfort there, letting worries fade as attention rested on glowing embers. Your eyelids grow heavier again, not from exhaustion alone, but from acceptance. The night has passed its most difficult hours. Morning is on its way, even if hidden by clouds. That knowledge lightens the mental weight just enough. You close your eyes briefly, not to sleep deeply, but to rest your thoughts. The cabin holds steady. The storm has quieted. The long winter remains, but this moment feels manageable. Psychological endurance often mattered as much as physical warmth. People survived winter not by eliminating discomfort, but by learning how to live with it without letting it consume them. You breathe slowly, letting that truth settle. For now, your mind is calm enough. The night has tested you, but it has not broken you. You remain here, awake, present, and ready to continue when the day finally begins. You look around the cabin with clearer eyes now, daylight slowly filtering through cracks and softening the shadows. This is the moment when romantic ideas about frontier life quietly fall apart. In daylight, the cabin does not look heroic or charming. It looks tired, functional, earned. Stories told later often painted pioneer winters as cozy scenes of firelight and family closeness. Thick blankets, warm meals, peaceful sleep. Those images linger because they are comforting. Standing here now, you know how incomplete they are. Comfort existed, but it was narrow and fragile, easily undone by weather or fatigue. You remember how the night actually felt, the cold creeping in despite your efforts, the constant listening, the need to wake and adjust, again and again. Sleep came, but it was negotiated, never guaranteed. This was not misery every moment, but it was never effortless either. Many later accounts blurred this reality, especially those written far from the frontier or long after it closed. They favored resilience over exhaustion, courage over routine discomfort. There is nothing wrong with admiration, but it often smoothed away the daily strain that shaped real lives. You feel that strain in your body now. Stiff joints, lingering chill, a dull ache behind the eyes. These are not dramatic injuries. They are accumulations. Winter worked slowly, wearing people down rather than striking suddenly. There is debate among cultural historians about why the cozy myth endured so strongly. Some argue it helped later generations frame hardship as meaningful sacrifice. Others suggest it offered reassurance during modern uncertainty, a story of simpler times overcoming difficulty. Whatever the reason, the myth leaves out much of what you experience tonight. You touch the rough wall again, feeling dried clay under your fingers. This surface tells a truer story. Uneven repairs. Old cracks reopened and sealed again. Nothing here was static. Everything required attention. Comfort was maintained, not assumed. Even family closeness, often highlighted in stories, came with cost. Sharing space meant shared discomfort. Noise, smell, limited privacy. Warmth brought relief, but also tension. Relationships were tested as much as strengthened during long winters. You think about how sleep was portrayed as restful and renewing. In reality, it was often partial. People woke tired and worked anyway. Rest accumulated slowly over weeks rather than nights. Endurance mattered more than recovery. A lesser-known detail appears in some frontier letters. Writers sometimes expressed surprise at how much effort went into simply staying warm at night, effort they had not anticipated before experiencing a winter firsthand. Many expected hardship in work, not in rest. That realization reshaped expectations quickly. You step toward the hearth and poke at the fire again. The action feels ordinary now, stripped of drama. This is what survival looked like most of the time. Small tasks done repeatedly, without ceremony. The cabin creaks softly as temperature shifts again. You no longer flinch at the sound. Familiarity dulls fear. The structure has earned your trust through the night, not by being perfect, but by holding long enough. You consider how myths form when details fade. People remember outcomes more than processes. Survival overshadows the countless small discomforts that led to it. Nights like this disappear into summaries and slogans. Standing here, you carry a fuller picture, not heroic suffering, not cozy simplicity, something in between, a life shaped by constant adjustment, where sleep was a tool, not a retreat. You breathe deeply, feeling both relief and respect. Relief that the night is over. Respect for those who lived this repeatedly, season after season, without certainty that spring would arrive gently. The myths soften the edges. Reality sharpens them. Both exist because people need meaning as much as accuracy. Tonight, you hold both, but you trust what your body remembers more than what stories promise. As light strengthens, the cabin reveals every flaw and every strength. It stands because of work, not charm. Sleep happened because of effort, not ease. You step back from the wall and let the moment settle. The night has taught you something simple and lasting. Frontier comfort was real, but it was earned inch by inch, hour by hour, through patience rather than romance. You move slowly around the cabin, noticing details that felt invisible during the night. Daylight, even this weak winter light, reveals evidence left behind by countless winters before this one. The structure tells its own story if you know how to read it. Not through words, but through wear. Near the base of one wall, a log bears shallow grooves where tools once struck repeatedly. These marks are old, rounded by time and hands. They suggest repair rather than construction. Adjustments made long after the cabin first stood. People return to this spot again and again, responding to stress points that winter exposed. In places where chinking looks thicker and darker, you see layers built up over years. New clay pressed over old. Straw from different harvests mixed together. This is not a single moment frozen in time, but a record of repeated care. Cabins were not finished objects. They were ongoing projects. Archaeological studies of frontier cabins often reveal uneven wear patterns like these. Floors worn smooth in narrow paths, hearthstones cracked from repeated heating and cooling, roof beams reinforced where sagging began. These traces show how people actually lived and slept, not how plans imagined they would. You notice that the sleeping platform sits slightly off-center, closer to the wall than symmetry would suggest. This placement likely followed experience rather than design. Closer to the wall meant less exposure to sparks. Farther from the door meant fewer drafts. These choices were refined through nights like the one you just endured. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about how accurately excavated cabins reflect daily life. Some argue that later modifications obscure original layouts. Others believe those modifications are the most honest evidence, showing how structures evolved in response to use. Looking around now, you side with the latter view. Change tells the truest story. A faint discoloration on the ceiling catches your eye. Smoke stains mark where fires burned too hot or drew poorly. These marks are layered, some darker than others, hinting at different periods of use. Fires that smoked heavily left lasting reminders, shaping later fire management habits. You step closer to the hearth and notice cracks in the stone, filled with soot and ash. These fractures formed slowly, expanding and contracting with temperature changes. Hearths were repaired repeatedly, often with whatever materials were at hand. Perfection mattered less than function. In some excavated sites, archaeologists have found animal bones beneath sleeping platforms, likely dropped accidentally or stored for later. This suggests how close food, sleep, and work existed in the same space. There were no strict boundaries between living areas. Everything overlapped. You imagine future hands uncovering this cabin, brushing away soil and debris, interpreting marks you leave behind. A thicker layer of clay here, a worn patch on the floor there. They would piece together a story, not knowing your name, but understanding your needs. There is disagreement about how representative surviving cabins truly are. Many that failed completely left no trace. Those that remain may represent better built or better maintained examples. Still, even the best cabins show strain. Winter left marks everywhere. You find a spot where the wall log has a small notch carved into it, perhaps to hang a tool or lantern. The edges are smooth from use. This small convenience speaks volumes. Even in hardship, people shaped spaces to suit daily routines, including sleep and night work. You run your hand along the platform again, feeling indentations where bodies rested night after night. Wood remembers pressure. These shallow depressions are not accidents. They mark where people chose to place themselves, guided by warmth, safety, and habit. A lesser-known discovery from some cabin sites includes personal items tucked into wall gaps, buttons, bits of cloth. These may have fallen accidentally or been placed deliberately to block drafts. Either way, they show how personal belongings became part of the structure itself. You step back and take in the whole room. Nothing here is random. Every imperfection reflects a response to need. Archaeology does not reveal heroic moments. It reveals repetition, sleep, repair, fire, rest, over and over. The cabin feels quieter now, as if aware it is being studied. The marks it carries are not flaws, they are evidence of endurance. People slept here not because it was ideal, but because it was possible. You nod to the walls, acknowledging what they have held. The night you experienced fits into a much longer pattern, one winter among many, one sleeper among countless others. As you prepare to move on, you carry this understanding with you. The past leaves traces everywhere. You only have to slow down enough to notice them. You return to the sleeping space one last time, not because you need rest now, but because the body remembers where it endured the night. The blankets are rumpled. The platform still holds the shape of sleep. Morning has not erased the effort it took to get here. It only softens it. Outside, the storm has moved on, leaving behind a quiet that feels earned rather than empty. Snow lies heavy and clean, reshaping the world into something calmer than it was hours ago. Winter has not ended. It has simply paused. You understand now that this is how it works. Relief comes in intervals, not conclusions. Inside the cabin, the fire burns brighter again, fed carefully. Warmth spreads more evenly this time. Daylight seeps through cracks and knots, revealing the space fully. Nothing looks new. Everything looks used. That feels right. You sit and let your body settle, acknowledging the fatigue that remains. This tiredness is not failure. It is evidence of effort. People who lived this way Learn to accept lingering exhaustion as normal. Strength was measured in continuation, not comfort. Sleep tonight will come again, and with it, the same calculations. How much wood to burn, where to place bedding, who sleeps where. The routine will repeat, shaped slightly by what the last night taught. Survival is iterative. Each night adjusts the next. There is still discussion among historians about how people maintain morale through long winters. Some point to faith, others to routine, others to sheer necessity. Sitting here now, you sense that sleep itself was a form of morale. Not perfect rest, but enough rest, enough to keep going. You think about how winter narrowed focus. Days became about essentials. Nights became about holding warmth and breath. This simplicity was not peaceful, but it was clarifying. Everything unnecessary fell away. The cabin stands quietly, repaired and reinforced just enough. It will need attention again. You accept that. Winter homes were never finished. They were negotiated spaces, reworked constantly in response to cold. You place your hand on the wall one last time. It is warmer now, no longer rimmed with frost. The memory of ice remains, though. You will remember how close cold came. That memory shapes future choices. Outside, light strengthens slowly. The world begins to move again. Inside, you feel ready to move with it. The night did not defeat you. It instructed you. You take a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling warmth fill your chest. Another winter night survived. Not easily, not comfortably, but successfully. And now, as the day unfolds, your body carries the quiet knowledge of how to endure the next one. The fire settles into a gentle rhythm. The cabin breathes softly. Snow outside reflects pale light, easing the sharp edges of the world. You feel the weight of the night lift from your shoulders, replaced by a calm tiredness that asks for nothing more than patience. There is no need to rush. Winter teaches slowness. Each movement is deliberate. Each breath is enough. You allow your thoughts to soften, no longer scanning for danger, no longer counting hours. The sounds around you fade into a steady hush. Wood creaks quietly. Embers glow without urgency. The cabin holds its warmth, just for now. You imagine lying back down, not to sleep deeply, but to rest without listening so hard. Your body remembers how. Muscles loosen, breathing lengthens. The night feels distant, already becoming memory. Nothing needs to be fixed at this moment. Nothing needs to be decided. The storm is gone. Morning has arrived. You let the quiet carry you, gently, like a hand resting on your shoulder. Sweet dreams.